It's Brad's Laboratory. It's kinda crazy and a little bit weird, but it's gonna be awesome sauce cause it's Brad's Laboratory. It's Brad's Laboratory. So grab a spot, you'll learn a lot, maybe even how to build a robot cause it's Brad's Laboratory.
Alright, here's some time I spent kind of choosing what connector to buy. Started looking at the standard sex ones, but I really wanted to have sockets in the housing of the metal detector and pins in the cable end of it. So I picked those out and then ordered those. And you also need pins in a back shell. I actually had the pins in the back shell, so I didn't actually buy those on my order. I just ordered the connectors themselves. Next, I had to take the metal detector apart. So here I am. There's two screws that remove the handle. One's a pan head, and one's kind of a flat head. I forget what they call those. It's kind of a flat head with a little bit of a pan. And then there's two screws on the armrest that come off. Those are just in the plastic, and then the armrest will come off. And there's a little plastic spacer that is in there with the armrest. Okay, next this screw comes out and there's a little nut inside that'll fall down inside. 4 more screws, 1 under the battery cover and then 2 up in the nose. Those need to come out. So knobs have to come off and then things start to come apart. 1 screw on the printed circuit board and the board pops off. Now things are pretty loose in there now. I'm just going to take the headphone jack off just to make things a little bit easier. I put the nut onto the headphone jack so it doesn't get lost. There's the nut that fell off of that 1 screw that holds the shaft on. Okay, the last thing to do here is to cut the cable. Alright, I should start by prefacing that I've been in this detector a little bit because I've been reverse engineering it. I have removed some of the hot glue that was securing these wires to the PC board. But I also just boogered the heck out of it trying to move this shield and the jacket down closer to the board. I finally just gave up and just ripped the jacket off and the shield off and then rebuilt it with some tin foil, which you'll see here in a little bit. So here I am. I'm going to strip the wires. I think I just go ahead and strip all of them at the same time here, and then I'll crimp the wires on there. That red one is loose because it pulled off from the board. I show that one here separately. Kind of here's the pin that's going to crimp onto it, and these are female pins for the bulkhead connector. And you kind of put them in there and hit the first click on the ratcheting mechanism and then crimp it down all the way down, and then there you have a connection to the female pin. Here I am doing the rest of them that are attached to the PC board, over and over again, repetitive function. I can't count the number of pins that I've crimped over the years. They call these pins actually stamp pins, and then the mil-spec ones are kind of like a machine pin where they actually make them on a turret lathe. So here we are. I'm going to fix the shield wire that I boogered up. I think I just twist it back together here, cut it a little bit, and then cut it in half. And then I add in some, I crimp the pin on it, and then I put it in some helping hands and solder it onto some old solder braid for removing parts. It's going to make a better connection to the shield. And the whole intent here is to keep the shield integrity so we don't get any interference inside the box between the connector and the board. So here I have the shield wire lengthened, and I'm just reattaching the red wire that fell off, and then I'm using tin foil. I tried to use the original foil that came off, but it just wouldn't go back on real easy, so I wound up using tin foil. The wires were shielded, the yellow and green, and then the red and blue were shielded separately, so I kept that shield method, the tin foil. Got it all on there, and then cut the tin foil to size, and then heat shrink the whole thing with some red heat shrink. So you see that red heat shrink sliding on here. You might notice that the shield wire is on the outside of the tin foil, and that is how the connection happens. It's not a solder connection because you can't solder onto aluminum, but it is a forced connection because the heat shrink, when I shrink it, will force that connection to happen to the tin foil and make that shield connection. So there it is, pretty much all shrunk and ready to pin the connector. Okay, I used a standard color code for the pin numbers. That way the colors match the pins and I wouldn't get confused when I was doing the other end of the cable. It's pretty easy, just stuff the pins into the right numbers. These connectors have the numbers printed on them so you don't get confused and you don't put them in the wrong hole. The shield just went into 1, red went into 2, yellow went into 4, green went into 5, and blue went into 6. That kind of follows the standard color code and keeps me straight. Once they're all into their right holes, you just push them in. I used a little dental pick here and just push them in tight. They make tools for this, but I found the dental pick works the best, actually. Just shove them down in there till they snap in. And at this point, we're kind of done with this side of the cable. So we'll move on to the other side. Alright, here we are getting ready to pin the connector on the coil side. This one went a lot better than the other one. I just cut it back, cut the foil off. There's the drain wire sticking out, and then we got the colored wires there, the 4 colored wires. This one I was trying to show it a little better, and so you just strip them and then put the pin on. So there's one done. Again, this is tedious work, just same thing over and over again. I like to twist the wires a little bit. When you're doing mil-spec work, you're not supposed to disturb the braid or the lay of the wire, so that's really not correct if I was working for the military or doing mil-spec work, but this is a crappy metal detector. Okay, now I'm doing the blue wire, and I think I just did them one by one for no apparent reason. I think it's probably easier to do them all at once, strip them all and then pin them all. But here I did them one by one. So you can see the crimp happening. Move on to the next one. Alright, go ahead and pin out the rest of the pins. The red and the yellow are left, and the shield still. It's happened pretty quickly, but very repetitively. Okay, this is the last pin. This is the shield pin. I'm going to put a little bit of clear heat shrink on there before I crimp the crimp on. Again, I'm just twisting the braid a little bit. This is some really cheap wire from China, so it's giving me some issues. But I got it together and I got the crimp on it here. And then the next thing I do is I put the back shell on. I have to take the screws loose. Got a little piece out, and then the back shell goes on. And then I follow that up with a little piece of heat shrink to kind of keep everything together inside the back shell. And then I go ahead and I start pinning out the connector. Unfortunately, I had my camera set a little bit odd here, so I didn't catch all the pin insertions on the coil end of this connector pinout. I did just follow the same pinout that I used in the previous connector. At this point, all the electrical connections are done. It's just screw the back shell onto the cable clamp and clamp it back down with the screws and a little plastic bit. She's all done. I did shrink that heat shrink before I put the back shell on. Next we on to modifying the case. So I had to get this little grommet out that was in there before, which didn't come out that easy. But I finally did get it out, and then it's just a matter of trying to figure out where to drill the hole. I drilled one of the small mounting holes through the connector into the case, and then I measured and I drilled where I thought the center would be, and then I used a step bit to increase that center hole, being careful to kind of push it away from the existing hole until I was all the way through. I did check the fit of the connector a couple times, and I did wind up switching bits to one that went up to I think 7/8 inch. I wanted to have more room than that, so that there was some wiggle room for the mounting screws and also the other mating connector that screwed onto that. So there, once I have it in with one screw, I put one screw in and then do another mounting hole, and then I do two, and then I can finish the last two mounting holes. Pretty quickly you see that I wound up getting that in there just fine. Here's the last two mounting holes going in now. I did have to go to the store and buy some flathead screws. I thought flatheads would be better for there so you didn't scrape your knuckles up when you were putting the connector on and off. Alright, now it's just as simple as putting in the connector and the nut on the screw and tightening everything down. It takes a little bit longer to get the nuts on than it does to tighten everything down. The last nut is probably the most difficult. It gave me trouble tightening it. It's just right in the corner there where the shaft goes. I mean where the bump out for the shaft is. So I had to actually use a pair of pliers to get that tight. But here we are tightening it with a nut driver and a screwdriver. So just getting them nice and tight. Like I said, 3 of them went perfectly. The last one I couldn't get the nut driver on. So I wound up using a pair of pliers. You'll see that here in a second. So I just held it with a pair of pliers and got it on there. And I think that came out pretty good. Alright, in the home stretch here, just doing some reassembly. One of the things is that nut that fell out from the shaft, I'm going to super glue in so it doesn't fall out anymore. That only took a second, and it makes it so I can remove the shaft without that nut falling off inside the metal detector. Then it goes back together the same way it came apart. The board goes in, gets screwed down with the one screw. The audio jack goes back on and gets screwed down with its little nut and tightened up with a pair of pliers. Then the case starts to come together. One thing, you got to make sure that the wires are out of the way of the speaker. Then get the handle in there, and you can put the 4 screws into the case. So one in the battery compartment, one outside of the battery compartment, and 2 on the nose of the metal detector. So now that those are all in, the last thing to do is to put the shaft on. Did we put the shaft on? Oh no, we're going to do the handle first. So loosen up the handle a little bit and then put the armrest in. 2 small screws, screw the armrest on. then the handle goes back on. Flip it over, add that little spacer and the screw. Now then we're putting the knobs on. Make sure they line up with the markings on the case. Takes a little bit extra time. And then the shaft goes on. So got both screws, the one with the super glued nut and the one that goes all the way through and into the handle. That one seems to take forever to screw in because you have to screw through all that plastic and into the nut that's captured inside the handle. Okay, we're pretty much done here. We just got to mate the connectors together. What this whole modification does is it allows me to take this apart and stuff it in a backpack if I want to go out in the woods and hunt for some metal or some gold nuggets. So there it is. This is keyed, so you have to put it in a certain direction. Worked out pretty good. Let's put some batteries in it and make sure it still works. These are kind of cool little batteries. The yellow tops come off and you plug them into a USB port and it charges them up. So I got 4 of those and just 2 regular alkalines. Here I am turning it on. It's detecting that pair of pliers there. So she's all working.
Hi, Brad here. I just wanted to take a second and personally thank you for watching my video. If you could click the subscribe button down here, I'd appreciate it. I also selected another follow-up video for you up here, and if you could give me a like, I'd really appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.